All right, let's see if this is actually working now. Let's connect and let's find out on the phone and see if this whole thing is functioning. And this is the most boring part where we figure out whether or not anything's working. We're going to assume that it's working. Okay, so we last left off with generating this game. So we are currently working on what was formerly known as Poop Shoot, but is now currently known as Feed the Elder Wyrm. And if we hit run, because I need to remember what the hell I was doing, honestly, because I can't remember. It looks like we have lots of buttholes everywhere for some reason, and catching food, firing food off, and then we have, let's see. Okay, so let's open up our documentation for this really fast and see if we can't find any of that stuff. So that's going to be in our Google Drive. If we can find any of that. Let's see. Documents. Unfortunately, I'm not working with multiple screens anymore, so I'm going to need to kind of keep things off to the side. Let's see. Insatiable worm. Here we go. Okay, so what did we last leave off for this? So it looks like we have to do control the location of the esophagus with the keyboard and mouse so it moves vertically. So the esophagus is right there. Didn't we do that? Create a queue of food. Let's see. So that's something else we need to do. Whoops. Let's get the stream out of here. Oh, really? I can't keep the chat open at the same... All right, let's try to... I cannot minimize that. All right, so we might not have much of a chat going on today. So let's just see if we can't make that really tiny and sort of shove it out of the way and put that over there. Control the location of the esophagus with the keyboard and mouse so it moves vertically. Create a queue of food so that you can choose combos. Have poop created that needs to be carted away. The poop contains valuable treasures that can be used to update your input-output process, and then create some sort of upgrade power-up system as you add different types of food. So we have a lot of things we can play with. Although we're running into problems already with the game, we can see that we have this queue of poop or food, whatever the hell this is, on the top. That's causing us problems. So we might want to go through and begin debugging these different elements. So right there you can see that we have the cabbage, I guess that's what that was, and potatoes generating, but they are getting fired off because they're part of the physics system. So why don't we go ahead and see if we can't fix that first. So this is going to be part of the, not enemy waves, but probably under the environment. And then we have FWT, so this is the front wall top, front wall bottom. Cosmic stars, transitionary zones, it's not going to be that. What about under old? So there we go. So under the old part is when we originally had this game as poop. Instead of what it is now. So why don't we go ahead and rename this game object and just call this food spawners for now. Spawners, there we are. And let's go ahead to the food top spawn point and open up that and take a look at how it's working. What we're probably going to want to do is let's allow Microsoft Studio, please, thank you very much. Oh wow. Okay, let's go ahead and close all of the scripts, all but this tab for now. And we'll close the mouth and the enemy waves as well. So where we last left off is that we have probably a prefab to a food object right here. We have a delta spawn time and is spawning time as well. We have a coroutine for generating spawn pellets, but the coroutine currently only has a Boolean value, which is checking whether or not it's spawning or not, and then we wait a certain duration. What we also want to do is see whether or not the location where the food is being spawned is occupied. And if it is occupied, we don't want to spawn something there. Therefore, we need something that's a little bit smarter than what we have right now. The spawn point itself needs to not only spawn an object, but also hold that object until it is available to then have something else there. So the food spawner is now going to take up two different things. And rather than trying to remember everything, we're going to add comments here, and we are going to add another comment here, and hopefully now we can say purpose And under the purpose for this, we're going to say a food spawner is responsible for, that's not how you spell that, whatever, responsible for both the instantiation of a food object as well as, let's see, object, as well as a spatial, I'm going to call it slot for a better term, a slot where the food will occupy. Food will occupy until full. Now this might change because I do want the food to kind of come down here and maybe have some sort of a grab whatever food item you want to, so that you can set up some sort of a combination of different food items. So maybe we should do that, because that's something that I want so much that if I wait, it's probably not a great idea. So we do have a problem with this. I was trying to use GitHub to store this project, and I downloaded a package for that. But honestly, it didn't work very well, and the UI kind of messed everything up, and I'm hating now that I have all these plus arrows everywhere. So we might want to see if that's under my package manager and delete that if necessary. So let's see here. Under the package manager, we have currently in the project, version control is going to be the plastic SCM, so that's not it. What we are going to have instead is probably under our packages system over here. We're going to have version control. No, that's not it. So it must have been a package I included. So if we go to plugins, possibly, yes, we have the GitHub plugin. So let's just go ahead and delete that from the project. Go ahead and delete that. Some assets cannot be deleted. Make sure there's nothing keeping a hook on them, like a loaded dynamically linked library. Okay, so let's let that die for a second. And then what we're probably going to need to do is restart Unity, go back to the desktop, and start the project over again so that we unlink everything necessary. Because we can see it's doing a lot of nonsense in the background. So let's go ahead and close this. Let's see, solution has been modified outside the environment. We're going to ignore that for now. Go ahead and close it. Save the current script and the changes we made. Let's go ahead and close out of Unity, save that project as well. What we are going to do is, I would like to open up that project beforehand, and let's go ahead and find Unity Hub, and let's go to the project itself. So Unity Poop Shoot, we need to change that name, obviously. Assets, and we want to go under plugins and make sure that we delete the GitHub portion of this. We're not going to use this for now. I'll come up with another system for backing up all of my content in the future. Okay, so now that's done, let's go ahead and open the game back up. And you know what, we should add to our list of things to do, change the name from Poop Shoot to something else. Okay, so what we currently are working on is controlling the location of the, no, we're not doing the esophagus. We are, let's see, have a queue of food is what we're working on. So let's move that to the top and create sub tasks for that. So the first thing is create some type of a vertical slot system for holding food that it moves between. And so the question is, do we force the player to eat from what's there, or do we allow a certain amount of time to pass? By forcing the player to only consume what's actually there, they're going to have to make bad choices. They're going to be given bad choices. If we allow the food to leave, they could, by random chance, end up getting something that works for them. So it's probably better that they have to make bad decisions, or not optimal decisions, for the game to be somewhat more interesting. At least that's my first thought. So why don't we go ahead and create some sort of a vertical slot system on the side over here that the food will then go into. So going over to scripts, let's see, we have Elder God, enemies, reward, food, shoot, controls, food spawners. So why don't we create a new folder, and we're going to call this, what do we want to just call this? Just call this slot system for right now. It's going to be hopefully a generic system that allows us to have different things go into it. So we'll put food spawner under the slot system to begin with, and then we'll right click, create a new C# script. The new script is going to be called, maybe it should just be a slot as a base class. Then we'll create a new C# script, and we'll call a maybe a slot group, something like that, so that we have multiple slots that fall under that group itself. So let's go ahead and open this up, create the slot, which right now is just going to be a transform, but we might want to add additional functionality to query that slot and to know what its state is, whether or not it's occupied or not. So why don't we do that? So let's just do a bool is occupied. No, we don't even need to do that, really. We can create a reference to a transform, I think is what we're going to end up wanting for this. So let's do a transform, and let's just say, we don't want to call it transform. We want to say something to do with occupying. What is filling it? Filled with, but that's a horrible thing to call it. So why don't we come up with something better? So why don't we say, what do we want to call it? It's a great question. Occupy synonyms. Occupy, inhabited, and lived in, tenanted, settled, lived in, inhabit, busy, employ, engross, preoccupy, hold, held. Let's just call it held for right now. I don't love that, but we'll do it. And we'll set that equal to null because there's nothing being held at the moment. We can check to see whether or not it is null, and everything should be good. Okay, so we're going to need probably to query the state of the slot. Now, we could just query null or the held object, but that's probably not a great idea. Why don't we go ahead and get rid of update? I don't think the slot needs to update at the moment. Instead, the slot is going to use some sort of a system, so we will do a public set. How about just hold? We'll call it that. So public hold, and we'll do a transform. No, let's call this object to hold. How about that? And what I want to do there is if held is equal to null, then we're fine. We can have it hold the object without a problem. So let's do object to hold, or let's do held is going to be equal to object to hold. So that's easy enough. Let's see, method must have a return type. That is correct. So let's do just void for right now. We could do a bool if we wanted to and see whether or not the object can hold it, but I think instead we're going to make it so that you have to query the state of the object first. So let's go ahead and do a public void, I don't know, I'm just going to wing this and see what happens. Let's just do a public void is empty, and that's going to return a bool value so that we can use that in a statement on maybe. Let's just do bool, let's do bool. Bool is empty, and then, because we don't know what kind of fancy shenanigans we're going to do in the background to test everything. So we might as well just make this a simple interface to work with. So is empty if, if held, if there's something being held, then we're going to return false. Otherwise, we will return true, right? True. Or if held is equal to null. Why don't we do it that way? Then we'll return true. I just want to do it that way in case we overload something. It's probably a better idea to do this. And we'll do a return false otherwise. So we have is empty. We have hold. We probably want a way of a getter for this object, but I'm trying to think if we ever want to just, yeah, we probably do. Public void I do not like these names I'm using, but we'll just call it public void get held at the moment. Or retrieve, how about that? Retrieve. In which case we are going to return a transform, which is the object that we're retrieving, and this should take in no parameters. So if held is equal to null, we're going to return null, right? That's our first check. The next thing we want to do is return the transform itself. Return held. And the next thing we want to do, but before we return held, we actually we want to set this equal to nothing. So let's just do transform temp is equal to held, and then held is going to be equal to null, and then we will do transform is equal to held is equal to null, return temp. That's what we'll do for that. once again, I know this is very simplistic. The intent behind this is that this will become more sophisticated with time, so we're starting to hide things behind this interface so we don't actually know what's going on. Oh, okay. Amazon package has been delivered. I wonder what that was. Anyway, so we have a slot here. We're going to need the slot group coming up next, I think. So let's go ahead and grab that. Let's find it, slot group, right here. Double click to open it up. And coming over here, so we have slot group. So the slot group is going to contain some sort of an array of slots. And then the question then becomes, does the slot group also handle organization? And how does organization actually work with something like this? Is it going to be what element was added and when becomes the system for organizing, or should that be its entirely separate thing? Do the transforms for the object matter at all as well? So I don't yet know whether or not this is going to be just a way of managing the slots in the group, or if this is going to end up becoming something that spatially constrains the object as well. I don't know. So let's just create for now, because we don't know anything. Let's just do a serialized field. You know what? Under a slot group, we can probably make these children of the object, and then the order of which they are child objects of the group then would become how objects would move through the slot system, I suppose. The only thing that becomes more complicated is if we have a multi-slot system like this one. So we might want slots to have connections instead. So what if we did that instead? What if we said slot inbound is equal to null, and then slot outbound is equal to null? And the idea is that there's some sort of a connection between these two things. Connection might in itself become its own class. For right now, we're going to be a little dirty with how we handle this, and we're just going to make it so that there are slots and slots handle it. Slot already might become an abstract class, honestly, with what I'm thinking at the moment. Okay, we're not playing with Oculus today, so we don't need to look at those emails. So let's go over here. So we have let's do this. I'm just going to do a serialized field for both of these. The idea is that you'll be placing what is inbound and what is outbound via the inspector. This could change at runtime if we want it to, but for right now it's going to be something that we just handle easily enough over here. So why don't we just start piecing this together, break things, and get it to work. So over here, we have an empty game object, which is doing nothing for us and has no components. Let's go ahead and delete that. We have food spawners. So let's right click, create a new game object, and call this, let's just call this food slot group for right now, and open this up. So we've got a food spawner, and then we have a slot. So the question is, does the food spawner talk to the slot? And should a food spawner, what kind of, sorry, I just noticed two messages popped in. For some reason, things are starting at the bottom instead of starting at the top. What kind of a game are you building? This one is called Feed the Elder Wyrm. You know what, I hope I didn't just break things, but the idea is that this is a 2D game where you have to manage basically a sort of a god that is to peasants. You're feeding it food. Over here in the center area is an interdimensional battlefield where everything you feed it on this side becomes weapons, power-ups, and so forth in the center to fight crazy, weird monsters and so forth. And then over here on the far right is where you poop. So in this case, it's shooting out with quite a bit of violent force, something out the rear end. So that's kind of what we're working on now. I'm working right now on a system, because right now you'll notice that these food pellets are kind of all over the place and they don't make sense. We're creating a slot system to make sure that they actually move properly within the context of this whole area on the far left. Hey man, your FNAF tutorial was awesome. I loved it. It followed almost the whole thing. It taught me a lot of coding. Pretty much got it down now. I'm very happy that you followed through with most of it, because it was a mess, honestly, that entire series. What was supposed to be a 5 or 6 videos ended up becoming 200. And that's because I just kept pushing it further and further and just playing with it and making it a personal project. That series is not dead. It's just becoming a different game, which I'm not working on today because this is the first time I've live streamed in close to 4 weeks. So that will be something that hopefully you'll see in the future. But for right now, we are just tackling this monster of a game. So, food slot groups. We have a position right here. Let's go ahead and reset its position back to the origin. Let's get rid of the game view. We don't really need that. And let's see, move this somewhere there, maybe in the central region. Now the question becomes, so this is a slot group. How do I handle connections to other slots? So let's go to right click, create empty. Let's call this just S1 for slot 1. We're going to move that under the group itself as a child object. Let's go ahead and reset its positional information so it's back at the origin. And what I'm thinking of doing is, that's like slot 1. We're going to move this one somewhere like maybe there. And the idea is the food pellet is going to move from this upper corner down to that slot. We'll figure out animations, things like that in the future. Those really don't matter. Why am I getting bombarded with messages from work right now? Board, I don't have the image. Sure, of course. Why not? Let's do this. So, sorry everyone. I need 1 second while we do this. We are rebranding the virtual reality center that I'm part of, and I need to send this to someone. Okay, there we go. Now we're back. So for right now, in the interest of making this work, let's just duplicate the slot object. I don't know, do you want to say 5 times? This is a gameplay thing. We're going to have to see what happens. 5 slots is probably not enough, honestly, but let's get it working first. Actually, so S1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's 6 slots. So that would be 3 slots for the bottom, 3 slots for the top is what I'm thinking. Let's go ahead and grab the food spawners, top and bottom, and move them under the food slot grouping thing. We have a directional light in the scene. We're not using anything that the light actually needs. All the graphics, as you might have noticed, are 2-dimensional and flat. That is something I would like to play with, though, is passing these assets through some sort of a normal map program that would take the 2-dimensional ones and convert them to 3D, or maybe just painting our own bump maps. I've never done that. It's been a long, actually I've done it, but it's been a very long time. So we could try to do that as well. Yeah, actually, if we created a height map, if I went in and painted grayscale values for these and did a height map manually, then we could convert the height map over to a normal map and then use the normal maps on these objects so we could get really cool particle effects and lighting. That is something we are going to add to the wish list. So let's go back to this and let's say test creating height maps for art assets to allow for interesting lighting effects. That is something we'll do in the future. Save that, close it, and coming back over here, so slot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, let's go ahead and grab these 3 and add a slot to each one of these. So we now have inbound. Inbound is of type slot. So in a perfect world, what we're going to do is we're going to use some object-oriented programming here to make this all work together. So slot is going to become the parent object for food spawner. So let's make some space here, move this down, move this over here, move slot over to the side. And so let's do food spawner is going to inherit from slot. All right, and that means we're going to need to make sure that certain functions are virtual. So we have start over here, so why don't we do a virtual protected void start, and then over here, under this start, we will do an override public, or not public, protected start. Great, so we've got that one there, that one there. We've got, that pertains to that doesn't matter, but we might want to go ahead and grab update and make this virtual protected void update void, and we'll do the same thing over here. We have no need for this yet, so we're just gonna delete it for now because it doesn't matter. So that's good. How often the food spawn? We don't need to worry about that. Okay, so now food spawner is of type slot, which means we can put a food spawner as a slot to one of these objects. So let's move food spawner slot up to the top so that we have sort of a hierarchy of how these things are listed. We're going to go to slot number 1, and for inbound connection, we're going to put in food spawner top. For S6, we're going to do inbound connection and do food spawner bottom. And then we're going to connect this one. Let's see. Oh, that has an inbound, which is going to be null. It does have an outbound. So this becomes the question of do we stipulate what outbound should be, or should that be auto-filled by creating a connection? So the idea being that I'm right now having to do twice the amount of work. I've got to set both the inbound and the outbound. If instead, in the future, we create like an editor script or something that allows us to grab two of these objects and hit connect, it could auto-fill those two fields for us to simplify creating the game. We're not going to do that right now. Things to think about in the future. Always thinking about the future. So food spawner top is going to have an outbound to S1. S1 is going to have an inbound from food spawner. It is going to have an outbound to slot 2. Slot 2 is going to have an inbound from slot 1, and then it's going to have an outbound to slot 3. As you can see, the drag and dropping here makes a lot of room for errors, so it's not like the best thing to do. S3 is going to have an inbound from S2. S6 is going to have an inbound from the food thing. It's going to have an outbound to S5. S5 is going to have an inbound from S6 and go to outbound to S4. S4 is going to have an inbound from S5 and have no outbound. No outbound means it's the end of the line. All we need to do now is sort of equally space these out. Once again, this might be a good time for us to think about what we're doing, which I'm not doing in the least bit. So we're going to have 4.4 right there. If this is the 0 point in the axis, if we take this one and negate it, so we're going to put a negative right there. This becomes 4.4 at the bottom. Then what? So this is this one, this is this one. Let's grab these objects and put a icon on them. And since these are spawners, I'm going to make it maybe blue. There we go. So now we get to see the different points and where they exist. So we can grab this one, maybe move it somewhere, like, I don't know, right around there. Does that look good? And then S4 is going to be, I don't know, maybe there. No, it's not going to work. Maybe there. S5. Wait, hold on. We've got the food top. Then we've got S1, which we'll just place there. S2, which we'll do somewhere like there. S3, which can go, I don't know, there. S4, which will go there. S5, which can go there. S6, which can go, I don't know, right there. And then food bottom is right there. So there's the top one. There's the bottom one. You'll notice we got some kind of crazy numbers going on here. They don't matter too much. Okay, so these are not very well spaced at all, are they? So this one goes there, this one goes there. Let's move S3 to like there. S4, maybe down a bit. S5, down even further. S6, somewhere like there. And this one here. So the idea is that as the food spawns, it will move from one of these to the next to the next. Dink, 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 and move down, and then they'll get stuck here. So the oldest will be closest to the tongue that's shooting out, and the newest ones will be further away. So the idea is, by doing that, because the tentacle is based on distance with how fast it moves, because the newer something is, the less easier it'll be to eat. I wish I could say I did that on purpose. It just so happens that it came out that way. So we've got the slots here. We've got the food spawner, which has no inbound, but the nature of a food spawner by itself is that it does spawn something, right? This is kind of funny. This is a very similar system to a patent that I currently have out. So this is very similar to something I worked on for a vaccination site simulator. So I'm probably channeling all of that while I'm doing this. So let's see. So this is going to spawn food pellet. So while is spawning, that is very true, and importantly is and not held. So if something is currently not being held, that needs to be protected because we can't access it, which might be So wait, while is spawning and not held. The problem with this is we want the timer to increase with time, right? So yield return new, wait for seconds, delta spawn time. This waits till, we can't use how this is being done right now. We have to rewrite this. So this needs to continue to wait and check to see whether or not it's time to put a pellet in there. So it's not only just about this happening. So let's do yield return instead of new wait for seconds. We are going to do yield return new. What is it? New wait. Wait for fixed update. No, wait. We can do yield return null, right? So if we return null, this will just wait to the next update, which should be the next frame for when this occurs. But what we now need to do is So we can do this a few different ways. I'm trying to think about how I want to handle it. We might want to just tear this out of an IEnumerator to begin with. So here we handle the idea of instantiating this object, which is spawn food pellet. Let's change this up. Let's do void spawn food pellet, and let's just take the functionality of spawning a food pellet regardless, and grab this stuff here and put this under here. So we call it spawn food pellet. I don't know. Let's do I underscores for interface, isn't it? IEnumerator maybe would be our naming convention for this. So we'll do that as well. Okay, so here we have start coroutine, and let's call this instead check availability. Or how about spawn check? I don't know. And so this is going to start spawn check, and while we are spawning, true, what we want to do is increment. We want to check to see whether or not this is full, right? So we want to say if is empty. Might as well start using some of this functionality we have, right? So if this thing is empty, what is that? Empty is if this is empty, then we need to know. So if the slot becomes open, do you have to wait the full amount of time? So that's the question. For the next one to pop in, or will one pop in instantly once it becomes available? I don't actually know. I'm trying to think if I'm playing other games, what would actually happen. Oh. Okay, hold on. Let's see why I'm getting a phone call. Hello? Hello? All right, so we're hoping that that was a spam call because it's saying that someone has just purchased stuff on my debit card that should not be purchased. So this is a wonderful first live stream back where I get tons of wonderfully horrible news. Let's see. I'm hoping that this is all bogus nonsense because it was a restricted number. Normally they're better at telling me this stuff, so it usually comes through different channels, but we gotta check, right? So why don't we take 1 minute and just make sure that I didn't just lose a shit ton of money. All right, I'm not seeing any of these charges showing up on my actual account, which is good. So I'm not exactly sure what is going on. I've been getting hammered really hard lately by things messing with my passwords and resets and whatnot. So yeah, fun. Anyway, let's not worry about that, and let's assume it's a robocaller because it's going to be after 5 o'clock soon, and I won't even be able to contact my bank anyway. So, while is spawning, I think that you have to wait 2 seconds, the duration, regardless. So that's part of it too. So if this is empty, then you have to wait the duration. So this can be an IEnumerator called spawn check, which continues to happen. When this occurs, then we can call spawn food pellet, right? So hopefully there will not be another way for us to give this object food, because that could break the system technically. So start coroutine spawn food pellet. How do I want to do this? So this should be spawn check instead, right? And spawn food pellet instead is we're going to do an IEnumerator here as well, just because I don't feel like actually keeping internal timers for anything, and this will just make it easier to work with. So we are going to do a yield return new wait for seconds, and at that time we are going to wait for the delta spawn time. That will happen. Before that happens though, just to make sure, we're going to do another check to check if this thing is actually empty, because otherwise we're going to run into a bad situation. So we will do an if, so that's going to happen. We're then going to say, hey, are you still empty? And if you are still empty, do this. Otherwise, we're not doing anything. Yeah, it doesn't matter at that point. So spawn check while is spawning. So yes, are we still spawning? If the object is empty, then we are going to call spawn food pellet. So let's do start coroutine, and we'll call spawn food pellet. Great. So then we do spawn food pellet, yield return null as soon as that is over. But now we need to know that we're locked. So let's just do a bool is, how about waiting to spawn? Equal to false. Let's add a note here. Used to indicate that we the food spawner is open and available, but waiting for the countdown of delta spawn. That's how we'll do this. Okay, so waiting to spawn is going to happen. Waiting to spawn is going to be able to be false. We're going to do spawn check while is spawning. And so this is where we're ending up with a lot of different variables, and we need to be careful. So while we are spawning, and we are not waiting to spawn something, we're going to then check to see if we're empty. If we are empty, we're going to start the coroutine called food spawn pellet. At this point, we are going to set this equal to true, because we are waiting for this to now happen. We're going to yield return null there. We're going to have this happen up here. If it is empty at that point in time in the future, we're going to instantiate the object, and we are going to waiting to spawn is going to be set to false. However, we need to hold the object. And to do that, we need to call hold. So this dot hold, and we are going to hold food.transform. Now, this becomes the next question. Do we use transforms after all? I'm not sure. Transform is a general catch-all, which means we could store all kinds of crazy crap in here, right? If we only stored food, though, well, then it might actually be better for us. Because the system only works with that, and we won't get crazy stuff in there, possibly. But kind of want to have crazy stuff show up eventually in there. Sorry, I'm just checking to make sure that that was just a spam caller, after all, and not something else. I hate this stuff. Maybe I don't have a lot of money. Don't try to steal it. This dot hold food dot transform. We'll just go with that for right now. And importantly is, when do we pass this on to the next thing? That, I think, is just as important, because now we've got to step this thing down from one step to the next, to the next, to the next. So let's see here. Sorry, just double checking something really fast to make sure that this purchase didn't go through my other thing. Looks like I'm good. Okay, sorry everyone, but I am not interested in, is spawning and waiting to spawn. Spawn check, this messed me up. Spawn food pellet. We need to know how to, so we can retrieve, right? But the question is, who calls retrieve? It almost feels like someone else should be calling this and making this happen. So maybe the slot, but how do you know when you're supposed to pass it on? So slot itself isn't the class we're going to be concerned with. We kind of need another class which is going to do the handoff from one slot to the next slot. I don't have a great name for that, and because of that, we're going to call it something stupid, like how about just instantaneous instant transfer, instant slot. So the idea is that when it gets full, it automatically just moves it to the next one. This is something where we should probably create some sort of a class that handles the handoff itself, which we can do at another time. It's not the time for that. So let's call this, let's inherit instant slot is going to be of type slot. These need to be the same thing that we have over here. So food spawner is going to be a override protected start. We're going to do update, which is also going to be override. What does instant slot do, though? When instant slot is full, it's going to instantaneously transfer the object from one location to the next, but there needs to be a delay. Yes, the transfer from one slot to the next is instantaneous. So the name actually sucks because it's not instantaneous. It's more like delayed or timed slot transfer or something like that. Let's just do a float. Time to transfer is equal to, let's say it takes 1 second to move from one slot to the next slot for right now. If it takes 1 second to move from one slot to the next, then what we would want to do is check to see if that slot is available and then transfer it to the outgoing one, right? So in update, we could do it in update. We could do a coroutine. Let's do an update for right now. Elapsed time is equal to 0.0f. Elapsed time happens here. Update happens here. Let's do elapsed time. Elapsed time plus equals time.delta time. So that's going to pass that. If elapsed time is greater than or equal to time to transfer, then we are going to set elapsed time equal to 0.0f. We are going to transfer this object now to the next one. So if this first thing is, do we even hold something, right? Because we don't need to do anything if we're not holding an object. So if not is empty, so if we are not empty, then we can do this part of the process, right? If not empty, interesting. Hold on 1 second. think I'm up to... Of course, everything in life is coming at me right now. Let's do that really fast. All right. Anyway, if it is not empty, then we care about this entire process happening. This needs to be override, doesn't it? Override void update, override protected, void update protected, void update. If this object is not empty, then we're going to check the elapsed time. And if the elapsed time is greater than this, then we are going to give this object to the outbound thing. So let's go to the base class slot. And we have these need to be protected for right now. We could also wrap these up in a function if we wanted, or a method if we wanted to. We're not going to do that at the moment. So let's do protected. Let's do in. So inbound is what's coming in. I'm not going to have it so that we're not going to do that. We're going to check the outbound, right? So if outbound dot is empty. So if the outbound one is empty, then we are going to try to pass this to it. So outbound dot hold. Hey, outbound, could you please hold this object for us? So we are going to hold what is held, right? So let's just do this dot held. I like to use this because it reminds me that it's part of this class. You can also use m underscore, which is more common with C++, but I don't like adding underscores and things to my code if I don't have to. This pretty much settles what it is. Outbound.hold, do we want to retrieve it first? Because hold gives it, but it doesn't relinquish control of the object. So let's just do this dot retrieve, which I don't love either because now we're retrieving it from ourselves, and shouldn't that be something easy to do because instant slot doesn't need to do this, right? But it's handling a lot of functionality, so let's just go with it anyway. So this dot retrieve, let's just do transform temp is equal to that. We need like a another function called like pass off, right? That handles all this code in one shot, so that we don't have to do it all ourselves, which we'll get to. So, and we're not going to do this dot held. We're going to do that. So this is going to retrieve the object, relinquish, get rid of it in our system, and then set it to go out someplace else. For right now, we are going to have, how do we want to handle transforms? We have a transform. Currently, hold is, I almost want a separate series of classes that handle movement and where objects go. But for right now, let's just do, if we're holding the object, held.transform.position.local. Local position is going to be equal to this dot, we're going to reset it back to 0. So let's do vector 3.0. And then we're also going to do held dot, that's all we need to do. Let's just reset the transform. So hold means take the object, pop it back to wherever the current slot is. There are problems with this already. I know. We're going to deal with it with time as things become more complicated. So retrieve does not matter. Importantly, we're not using any parenting here. So that's something else we need to just keep in the back of our heads at the moment. Okay, so instant slot has time to transfer. We have elapsed time plus equals is greater than or equal to time to transfer. This happens, elapsed time is equal to 0. This we're adding up, we could subtract as well. It doesn't really matter. Importantly, instant slot should have all the features and functionality of slot, so we don't need to do anything. We do need to change the class we're using on all of these, though. So we're going to have to go back in and change this stuff. So let's go ahead and remove those and find instant slot and put them under. Now, technically, food spawner should inherit from instant slot rather than the other one. And this is where things kind of suck, because now we got to go back through here. And let's see, so we have outbound is going to be S1, inbound is nothing. This one is going to be inbound, outbound, inbound, outbound, bink. Inbound is nothing, but outbound is going to be you. Do we have an outbound for you? Yes, this one, and we're going to do inbound is this one. That's outbound, I'm sorry. Inbound is going to be this one. And this one now, this one is going to be outbound, and this one is going to be inbound. Okay, with that, I think, oh, we have S4. So S5, S4 is going to be inbound, and there is no outbound for that. Okay, importantly now is we're making some assumptions. So we have retrieve and then outbound. We need to see if outbound, if the object doesn't have an outbound, it can't do this, right? So if is empty and outbound does not equal null is how we're going to handle that for right now. Okay, coming back over here. Why am I getting more messages? What is going on? Okay, let's see what happens. Hit run. And so that popped down there. And let's grab it. So it's not going to the next one, which is important. But let's see if another one even pops up. It doesn't. So that system is flawed because, oh, the tentacle does not adhere to the slot system, so it's always going to technically stand there. So the tentacle needs to, like, say, hey, let go. It needs to talk to the slot system to make this work. But regardless, if this was truly functioning properly, food spawner needs to do a pass off, right? So food spawner, I think, needs to inherit from instant slot instead of just slot. Now, this has an update function. This does not have an update function. So this will continue to happen regardless of what happens here. So that was actually a good call on my part to keep these two separate, I think. So let's go ahead and hit that. Let's see, warning the field. It doesn't matter right now. It has to do with my enums, and I think I'm using an old style to do that. So that filled there, that popped out. This should pop to the next one after a 1 second duration, which it's not, as we can see here. So let's go to, let's not do maximize on play anymore. Let's move this off to, I don't know, the side over here. Move this over here. Check out our console. We've got no errors coming in. We've got some touches happening, but nothing else. So let's start thinking about why this isn't working. So food spawner itself, let's take a look there, is going to do start coroutine spawn check. Spawn check is going to happen. It's got to be spawning. That is a bool value, and it is enabled at the moment. So that will happen and is not waiting to spawn. So waiting to spawn is false, which means that nodding that will make that true. So this is a fully true statement, so it will go through this. If is empty. So is empty was under slot. Is empty is here. So if held is equal to null, return true, right? Null is set to be no, held is set to be null, so that's going to happen. So that pass is going to occur as well. Start coroutine then. So then we start spawn food pellet. And then we call waiting to spawn to be true, which should keep us from having this loop occur until we're ready again in the future, right? Oh, this will end. That's a problem. So I didn't take that in consideration. This should have become an infinite loop of constantly checking for the spawn. This is going to cause it to exit the first time this happens, and we don't actually want that. So let's kind of do this slightly differently. So while we are spawning, we'll do an if not waiting to spawn is what we'll do. So we don't break out of this loop. And then after that happens, right, we have a yield return null here. I mean, technically, we can have this here, right? So it always does the yield return null regardless of what happens. Okay, so come back here. Let's go ahead and hit run. Okay, you popped there. Oh, okay, so another one got created. So we're running into the same issue as before. So the rigid bodies and everything are causing problems as well. That is something else I didn't think about. We're probably going to need to turn off and on the physics system as this stuff happens. So how do we want to do that? So spawn, this happens here, this happens. So the good news is that we are starting the coroutine spawn food pellet. That occurs, and then this happens here. Then we do a yield return for a certain amount of time. We check again if it's empty. If it is empty, we instantiate a food pellet, this dot transform. Instantiate, does that, I'm sorry, does instantiate transform parent. So we actually don't want that to happen. I don't think, because I'm not using parent-child relationships to store these things at the moment. So we're going to get rid of that. It's just going to exist. This dot hold food dot transform is going to be responsible for doing that. Then we're going to do rigid body dot get component rigid body. We grab the rigid body. What is body though? Why do we have body? Why do we care what the body is doing? That's because we added a force there. We don't want to have a force right now, so we don't actually need the rigid body. We're going to get rid of that line. We're going to hit waiting to spawn is equal to false, so that happens. The problem is this dot hold. So this is holding it, right? So this should set it equal to full. We call this dot hold. This dot empty should not fire anymore if this is truly being held. So we should probably monitor that when this happens. So right now we have inbound, outbound, food pellet, which we should call that prefab, really. So here we have food pellet, right click. Let's go to refactor. I just want to rename it, not refactor. Let's go to rename and then just say prefab underscore food pellet apply. Once again, that's just me telling myself that I know that that's a prefab. Now, I don't like that underscore thing that it does, actually. So let's rename this again and just do prefab underscore food pellet. Hit apply. Come back over here. And let's see. So that we lost the food pellet. So let's see if we can't grab that. So scene, assets. No, it's not going to do that. So let's grab... let's find our prefabs. Let's lock this so we don't lose it, because we are going to lose it. Let's go to prefabs, food, and then find, for the top one, I think we were doing cabbage. So we'll do that. And then for the bottom one, we were doing potatoes. This will become something else in the future. Oh, wait. Oh, I have it locked. No, duh. So yeah, it's not going to work. So let's do this one here. Turn off this one. Go to potato and put that one there. There we are. Now we're good to go. So what we want to watch is what's being held by this object. So for right now, let's just do a serialized field on this one so we can see it in the inspector as things happen. So let's do a serialized field and transform held. Come back over here, see what happens. All right, it is going on 5 o'clock. We're probably going to make this a short stream today, just because everything under the sun is blowing up in my face at the moment. We do not want maximize on play. Go away, maximize on play. Move this here for the moment. Turn off maximize on play. Let's just move it to the side. I really don't like this layout for what I'm doing right now. Let's move plastic SCM over here. Let's put the console down here while we're debugging things. Maybe over here. No, console's better over here. Let's do that. All right. Let's hit run. Let's save. Hit run. And watch what happens to that field. So held is food, right? Then it's no longer being held. It's gone. So it created an object and then it's going missing. And if you notice, it's happening there. Why? Because something's getting screwy with the transform. So let's go to the food spawner really fast and see what's happening. So there's food spawner. And let's go to slot. This is saying held.transform.local position equals vector3.0. That's actually not what we want. The held's object should not be equal to vector 0. The held's object should actually be equal to transform.position. I don't know why I did this. I was getting my parent-child stuff confused. Held.transform.position is going to be equal to the... So hold on. Held is equal to held is equal to object to hold. Held.transform.position is going to be equal to this.transform.position is what we want. This is all happening in world space. That's important to note. Not child, yeah, subspace, child space, whatever. Okay, so, bink. Hey, look at that. Dink, dink. And it should fill up. And it fills up. And now, the spawn point fills, but that's it. So now, let's get the game. Why don't we get the game over here? Oh boy, yeah. We're going to need to check the bounds of the tentacle in the future and make sure they don't go way off. Okay, so now, though, we can grab... Oh boy, that's not working. Let's try this again. Hit run. So everything got kind of messy because of what I was doing there. So let's wait for the queue to fill up. Now, it's not going to work. Why is it not going to work? Because we haven't fixed the fact that the tentacle does not talk to the slot system. So if we grab that, it's going to disappear and it gets destroyed. Oh, but the slot gets open because technically I think it gets set to being null. But that's not a nice thing to do. But now we do have... Actually, this is already so much better. I'm enjoying this a lot more. But what I want is the food you eat, I want to become a vertical bar, I think, right here. And you can kind of cash in what you have, I think, to make whatever happens on this side. Right? So this is actually already going to cause a lot of things to think about while we're trying to play the game. Oh, what I also want to have happen is the food thing will automatically... the tentacle should auto-grab the closest food. Maybe? I'm trying to think. Because there's a lot to... Maybe we need a countdown timer to make it so that you can more easily move from... Because the idea is not to bombard the player with too much that's going on, right? The idea is that maybe after you destroy a certain number of things, the reward pops out over here. Just because having 3 separate parts is a lot to keep in mind as you're doing this, because you got to fight on this battlefield. So what I kind of want is maybe like 75% of your time to be thinking here, 25 over here, and then like, I don't know, I was going to say maybe not 25, 12.5, then 12.5, something like that. So I need to think about this, how I want this to work, because I want this part to be very engaging. And the idea is you're like, oh, I see something over here that I can do, or I can grab something interesting over here, and then, oh, it's time, and I'm going to fire off one of these things over here. But technically, actually, that's... Oh, wait a second. Why is this thing pooping out food? Okay, so that's a problem. We need to write that. Queue food set you choose. So let's do... let's get rid of this. What we want to do is poop should only occur when you kill an enemy. And the reward happens. Possibly inform the player of poop coming soon. Like a warning, like a big warning. You know, you're about to crap your pants. To crap your pants on, let's see, on an astral plane level. I don't know what I'm doing. Anyway. Okay, so I think, what is it? It's 5 o'clock. This was a good first run. I've got a relatively light day tomorrow, so I might come back and work on this some more after thinking about this a bit. Now that we've got kind of this system in place over here, I think I don't want you to have to keep clicking over here. This tentacle does need to be sort of operating on its own, so that you can focus more over here, because we haven't gotten to anything happening here, and I expect some crazy stuff to happen. I've got some new stuff I've drawn that I want to bring in here. I want to start putting some animated systems in, some bone systems, and making crazy bits move and fly around. So we will get to that. We might actually need to shrink some of the objects. But actually, before we finish, one thing that I strive to always do is to do an actual build. So why don't we do a build? So let's see, the last build we did was last month, actually. That's not terribly bad. So what is today's date? It is the 20th, so a little bit over a month ago. Whoops, we don't want that. Let's do 20_9_2022. Select folder, do a build, and make this happen. All right, let's, I'm not going to close out of this just yet. Let's actually run the executable. This is going to be slightly off screen because of I'm using an extra wide monitor at the moment. That's what I happen to have. But let's grab stuff. We need to start getting some sound effects in here too, even if they're junk. I want to start doing that. Let's grab this, start firing. So it looks like all the systems are for the most part working. Oh, did you see that? It hit 2. So that's a problem. These things, or maybe it's not a problem. I don't know. We'll have to figure that out. So this is pooping, right? Are you going to poop? Yes. So it's making the cart. Oh, with an ultra-wide monitor, or wide, whatever you call this, we can see the gap on the sides. So we're going to have to figure out something for certain resolutions, how we're going to want to handle that in the game. I'm not sure what I want to do. Okay, let's... Oh, do we not have the ability to quit? We have not added the ability to quit the game, have we? All right, so let's add that to the list of things. Make a hotkey to quit game. Or did I do escape? I thought I did program that in. Maybe that was a different game. Make a hotkey to quit the game. Make a simple UI to explain the game controls. That's another thing we want to do. All right, so with that, I think we're going to stop for today. Hopefully, if I'm not too busy, which I usually always am, I will jump back into this tomorrow. I'm probably going to keep with Poop Shoot for tomorrow. When we dive back into the Oculus Quest, I'm going to want to really dive into it. I'm not going to want to jump back and forth. There's just too much stuff to manage by doing that. All right, so I will see you all another time. I hope you all have a good night, day, wherever the heck you are. And we will see you shortly. So long and goodbye. If I can figure out how to turn this thing off. And I am trying, and that's the Windows Start screen. Oh, come on. Did I move this just too low? Come on. Where are you? Come on. Oh, no. Can we... Of course. So there's OBS. Now it's off the screen to some weird side. Let's use Windows. There we go. We'll use Windows key to move the thing. And finally, goodbye.